Hello YouTube, hello Music Radar, I'm Chris Bird and I'm here again with Steve Allsworth.
Hello.
Long-time Total Guitar contributor, and today we're going to be talking about quite an in-depth question that's been submitted by a reader called Tony Knight. Now Tony posted this on Facebook, so I'm going to read it out because it's quite in-depth. He said, I have an understanding of movable scale shapes and whatnot, but what scales go with said solo I still have trouble with. Anything past the basic 1-4-5 progressions. Is there any hope for me, or am I doomed to pentatonic hell? So Steve, I think there's quite a lot in that. I think we're talking about scales, we're talking about which scales over which progressions, and we're talking about pentatonics as well. So it's like 2 or 3 things in there to talk about.
I'd almost kind of, the thing that my ear gets drawn to first is the last part of the question, pentatonic hell. I would say there's nothing wrong with pentatonics.
Pentatonic heaven, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the basis, isn't it? The building blocks of most things, I would say.
Guitar-wise,
most scales. Yeah, I mean, for the guitarist, it's the sort of go-to scale, isn't it? But I think sort of how you use it. I mean, maybe we could kind of structure it in such a way that, you know, I would say a good starting point is learning those pentatonics, which it sounds like he's got down.
And that's great. That's
a
maybe
positive,
isn't it?
Adding notes. I think adding notes, but kind of knowing where you are in the scale. Because I think with pentatonics, the trouble is most students of mine over the years, they'll learn the shapes and that's it. Yeah, I know my 5 pentatonic shapes. Yeah, you know, play up and down. But actually, how to use them? You know, what is the number? What is the scale degree that you're playing at any particular moment? All those little things, and these tend to be the things which kind of get a little bit forgotten. Yeah. So having an understanding of that, what your numbers are, what are the important ones, which sound good over a chord progression or a chord or a static chord or whatever. But yeah, this idea about adding notes, I think, might be is always a good starting point, I think, for kind of exploring and moving beyond just playing pentatonics. So
shall we then, if we look at 1 or 2 of the pentatonic shapes, and if I play the odd chord or 2, and we can see how those particular notes that you're going to home in on, how they sound over those chords, and what kind of feel and what kind of mood you can get from those, perhaps like a different kind of harmony, and how important those are.
Sure. So maybe to start off, do you want to do like a static chord
so
or something?
We say, starting the good old A minor.
So the king of all minor key.
I'm not sure about a bit much distortion there.
So the thing is, I think probably a starting point with this, obviously it's knowing the shapes you'll have. And you'll notice as well, something I automatically do always with the minor third, even when you're playing over a minor chord, is to kind of just give it a little bit of a blues curl, what I call a blues curl, or a quarter note on that minor third, because that tends to be one of the key notes, either whether you're playing over major, dominant 7th, minor 11, whatever. You can create a lot of kind of feel and, you know, subtlety, should we say, just by doing that. Because you're almost hinting at going somewhere else, but you don't quite do it.
Yes.
So even doing that, you can sound very, very expressive to start off with. But what I would say is, when you're going through the scale, just know where the chord tones are. So the root, the 3rd, and the 5th, so that you can just automatically go through and go, okay, I know where I am. You know, as an example, if we're just going from the minor 3rd with that first C there, so that's your flat 3rd. And obviously, if you go all the way up to C sharp, then that will do the major 3rd. And we're just kind of going back, which is why a lot of the licks tend to be based around those kind of. So we'll always revert back to that root, because that's like the ground, isn't it? The foundation almost.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you play that chord again, you'll be able to, you'll hear that. Always come back to that root note. Always go back to that root note. The sort of knowing where those numbers are, I think, is probably the starting point. And then it sounds like is it Jacob? It sounds like he's got
Jacob was another guy who actually
it was Tony, wasn't it?
Similar questions.
So it kind of sounds like Tony's got his shapes together. He's probably got those 5 positions together. So maybe we would.
Those notes are all very safe harmonically, aren't
exactly,
they? Particularly with that chord. So we're playing that chord.
Yeah.
We're playing those notes.
Yeah.
kind of using the same notes. Almost,
well, a good way to get beyond that is kind of seeing those shapes. If we stick with that basic kind of box pattern that we've got, everyone knows that one. It's really happy. I just start adding a couple of extra notes.
Sure.
One's what I would say are consonant notes, and what I mean by that are notes that still fit within the context of that minor 7 chord that you're playing. So if we stick the 9 in, which is that B, suddenly what I'm playing makes that chord sound like an A minor 9 chord.
Yeah.
So instead of playing that minor third, you could potentially do that as a replacement. Direct.
Sure. It's a really rich sound as well, isn't it? It's not just that kind of basic fitting in with the chord.
Exactly. So it's a very sort of Gary Moore thing to kind of do that. So you can do it all over. Just add it, just basically think of it as a minor pentatonic plus a major ninth.
Yes.
It's a really nice sound, and that's a really good way of getting yourself out of that rut.
Yeah.
And then maybe you can start to do that with all those 5 positions as well. But all of these ones are what I would say are consonant notes. I mean, and you can do that with other ones as well, like the sixth is really, really good as well. So we were talking before, that's kind of like it gives us that sort of Dorian type thing. And again, if you're playing just a sort of basic... Straight with that F sharp in there. Put the 9th in.
Oh, I've gone to a different chord there. I've thrown it.
That's alright.
We'll go back to the A minor 7.
It gives it a slight sort of lift. That major 6 makes it sound slightly brighter, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Rather than your traditional... I mean, again, this is another thing. Always with these scale shapes, and we're only dealing with one shape on the fingerboard, is that your brain and your eyes will see all these overlaid scales one on top of the other.
Yeah.
I would say. So really, it's just a collection of... you've only got 4 fingers, but you can see it as that, that...
When I've taught this stuff, I've always found it's a case of not trying to map out everything on the fretboard.
Yeah, just
think,
I would stay in one position.
I could map all these notes out. It's going to be like this whole kind of journey of trying to find them. When in fact you've got a scale shape you already know, and just two notes to add into it. It's a really, really simple starting point, isn't it? And it's something that you don't... it doesn't take a lot of work to get that into your playing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably most students do the flat 5. That would be the thing, because that's probably the most basic addition of one extra note to your minor pentatonic. Hence makes it a hexatonic scale.
Yes.
But if you put that in, that will give us our blues scale. And already we're creating those really nice outside tones. I mean, that over the top of an A sounds hideous.
Yes.
But it's kind of this is kind of the dissonant note. So against that the consonant sound of that minor chord. So we don't want to stick around on them. But if we then go to an inside note or a consonant note, then it's going to sound great.
Yeah.
Or we can go, okay, instead of going down, go up. And it gives you a little bit of a more interesting sound. And there are loads of these little notes all around the fretboard, as you know.
Indeed.
And you can, well, I mean, look, I'll just show you quickly. If you were to, the strange thing happens actually when you play so-called wrong notes.
Yes.
If you just play me that minor thing that you were doing before, just stay on that minor chord. If you hear that flat 5, it sounds hideous. But if you resolve, here it is again. That kind of thing. It sounds hideous by itself, but as long as you resolve it to an inside note, it'll sound great.
Sure.
And there are all these wrong notes all over the place, but your ear has this great way of kind of adjusting, going, yeah, that's not, then we're back to a note which works. And that is absolutely fine. This is one of those things, if you play a wrong note, maybe play it 3 times and then resolve to a good note. And it'll actually sound fine.
So we've picked out 3 great notes. So we've had the minor ninth,
the ninth,
the
sixth,
and the flat
probably
5.
the flat 5, I mean, the other one we sort of touched on was that minor major third thing.
Yes.
And this is that kind of thing which can make you sound a little bit more, it's slightly more colourful, should we say? Yeah.
Now there was a second half to this question, which was talking about progressions. So rather than sticking over one static chord, how does I guess what we're asking is how is this going to relate when we start moving the chords around?
Sure.
So should we look at a basic 1-4-5 to begin with, and how we could change the 1-4-5, perhaps a minor?
Well, so why don't we do, if we do 2 chords, just to get this absolutely drummed in and really clear, like what you did before.
Yeah,
which is kind of your classic.
Went to the 4, didn't I?
Yeah. So we just all you're doing there is going from a minor 7 to the 4 chords to a D9, D7, whatever. The thing is, when you're going between these 2 shapes, essentially you can use the same scale. You could use that minor pentatonic over the top. But what we want to do really is to target that D7.
Yeah.
The thing is to have a bit of an understanding about the chords themselves. I think always a good starting point with this, even with that first minor 7 shape, is to see how that relates to the scale that you're actually playing.
Yeah.
In this context, that D7 or D9 that I'm playing here, you've suddenly got that F sharp, which didn't exist in our minor pentatonic scale before.
Sure.
So potentially there are a few ways you can approach this. You can go, okay, well this is my shape here. Then I can go, okay, when I hit that D7 chord, then maybe then I can hit that F sharp that we had, that Dorian sound that we had before. In this context, there won't be Dorian because we're over D7. So you might be thinking D Mixolydian or whatever. It depends what the chord progression is. But so you could go from. So you can hear that. You can almost hear that without the chords. There's your minor.
Yeah.
So you can hear that. You're going to hit that major third, and you can hear that. I'll go, oh yeah, I've changed chords there.
Sure.
So that would be a really simple step just to deal with that. And again, if you're dealing with the 5 chord, you can do exactly the same thing. Depends if you're doing dominant or major or whatever. But you've got to think about the chords which are outside that basic pattern that you've got there.
So what we've done there is we've gone to another chord.
Yeah.
And we've literally just taken one note from the chord.
Yeah.
Which I think is quite a good, easy starting point again.
Absolutely,
so it's like we could go to any chord, we could go to a B minor 7.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what note to play, if you know the chord, you've got a set of notes that you can start. So you could start.
So you can target those same notes, exactly.
Go to the D.
Oh, minor, sorry.
B minor 0.
Yeah. It's kind of a pretty nonsense chord progression, but if you if you can see those chord shapes underneath, then we've got to listen to what chord progression is going on. But yeah, then you can target some of those notes within the chord.
That's it. So I guess the simple answer is choose your chords, learn the notes in the chords.
Yeah.
Use those as target
and
notes.
make mistakes as well. This is the thing, you know. All those kind of outside notes that I was talking about before, this will sort of lead you into other areas. You know, if you start wanting sort of targeting the chord movement before you get there, you can also do that. And this will give you this slightly sort of, I know a lot of guitarists want to kind of, well, how do I sound different and slightly outside this sort of, this mythical, you know, how do I sound outside? And it's just sort of, the basic concept is making
play the wrong note,
fit. For example, I mean, if we want to get really theoretical, there's a great thing you can do just with the basic blues chord progression, right? Which is go from A7 to D7. If over that A7 we do a half step, whole step, one of those. We're just doing a symmetrical scale, so but over the wrong notes. We're hitting the major third, the flat 9, awful. But it kind of sounds nice because it's sort of consonant.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So hitting some of those notes. And you can target some. Wrong notes. And it's like, you know, as long as you're kind of like, you can make it work to the listener. It kind of sounds a little bit snaky, you know, in and around.
So it's just having the confidence to use those notes.
Exactly.
Isn't it? It's like, you know, those notes don't sound immediately appealing, but in context,
you know, those old
the balls to actually deliver.
This is the thing. Those old pentatonic shapes we put in the magazine all the time. Sometimes just filling in the gaps on the fretboard and just playing all of them in random order.
And
you know, just use your ears. I think that's probably the thing, isn't it? So having understanding about, you know, arpeggios, chord shapes, scales, and then putting it all together, I think is is a useful thing? It's a very big question to answer, I have to say.
It's a huge, deep question, yes, yeah. And we will revisit again, I'm sure.
I think we're going to have to.
Cool. So I hope that's good for you. Cheers.